Okay, folks, I just wanted to drop you a note about the latest guilty pleasure that I enjoyed. It's a 60s and 70s soap opera horror series called Dark Shadows. Now, I first heard of Dark Shadows when they did a remake of the series back in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, featuring Ben Cross. And he played the vampire Barnabas Collins, which was a character featured in this soap opera, starting with the second block of major storylines. Now, Dark Shadows started off as a focus on the family, the Collins family of Collinwood Estate, and the matriarch basically was housebound and never left the mansion. And there were various goings on in the mansion and in the town surrounding the mansion. There was also an old house that had never been lived in or had not been lived in for years, where there were strange supernatural goings on. And so you had things like ghosts and you had things like zombies, but it wasn't until the second block of major storylines unfolded that you introduced the character of Barnabas Collins, who is a vampire from the 16th or 17th century, who had been imprisoned in the family crypt for 200 years. And once a thief had unbound him and become the vampire's day slave, then you got into much more intriguing happenings. And so the actual Dark Shadows collection on Amazon Prime, which is where I watched some of it, begins with the Barnabas Collins storyline. And so if you want to actually see the entire series from the beginning, you actually have to look for Dark Shadows, the beginning, and that will take you through the first 6 quote-unquote seasons of about 40 episodes each. That will start you from the very beginning of the show going forward. But if you want to just start with the vampire episodes going forward, just look for Dark Shadows. I followed the vampire storyline for about a season and maybe a couple more episodes into that before I realized that this was just going to go on way too long, and some of the characters were irritating the crap out of me. It's a very, very low budget soap opera, as they all were in those days. I mean, it started out in the black and white era, and if characters flub their lines, they just go right on as if nothing had happened. They correct themselves and move on. So it's not a very polished series by any means, and of course, sci-fi or special effects being what they were at the time, you're going to see a lot of laughable stuff. But at the same time, it was a rather enjoyable series, and it allowed me to get into a kind of soap opera mindset and let me feel kind of what it was like to watch soap operas in those days. Because I remember when I was growing up and my mother would watch Days of Our Lives, or she'd watch maybe one of the other Guiding Light or General Hospital. I mean, she didn't really watch too many of those soap operas. It wasn't until later on that we started watching the serialized ones on late night TV like Dallas or not Falcon Crest, Knots Landing, that came out once a week. But these were shows that came out every single weekday, and so there were an absolute ton of these shows. Like I said, there were 6 40-episode seasons even before you got to the vampire episode, and then you had 26 seasons of Dark Shadows lasting from 1968 to about 72 or however long. Now, here was my estimation of the whole series altogether. I couldn't follow it past maybe a season of the Barnabas Collins storyline because I could just tell this was going on way too long. It was getting very convoluted, and thankfully there was a Wikipedia story page of the televised storylines that were on Dark Shadows, and I was able to just go and get the summaries of what was going on. And oh my goodness, I mean, I thought that it was convoluted enough where it was, but they were going to introduce time travel where they were going back to the 1700s and the 1800s and pick up storylines there that would have impact on the future and start rewriting various things of history. They were going to have ghosts and werewolves and all sorts of curses and occult things, and it was just one humongous convoluted mess that I knew that there was no way I was going to follow this stuff. So I just basically kind of watched a few episodes here and there to hit the high points, and then I was going to just write it off. But, and here's where I want to make a recommendation to you if you're in any way interested in watching this show. It turned out that the last, I want to say 40 episodes of Dark Shadows, starting with episode 1199, if I'm not mistaken. You can look at Amazon Prime for the numberings, but it was season 25, episode 14. If you start from there, that show all the way to the end of the series, which is about 40 episodes, is a self-contained storyline set in a parallel universe where the actors have been recast in other roles. And it takes place in the 1840s and deals with the Collins family as being under this generational curse, where every generation you have to hold a lottery and then consign the loser of the lottery, or the winner of the lottery, to sleep in a bedroom that's been locked off from the rest of the house, and that person will either die or go insane. And that is the only way to keep a plague from spreading to the rest of the household and killing everyone in the mansion and in the whole town. So the Collins family has been consigned to this doom for 160 years, and this storyline in Dark Shadows basically starts off with the patriarch nearing his death, and he is the one who had to go into the room before, and so they're going to have to hold another lottery. And then, of course, there's the standard, usual soap opera stuff of, you married the wrong person. Well, I'll marry her sister instead, et cetera, et cetera. And, but it all comes together very well, and it's a very concise storyline. Everything is pretty much self-contained. I don't think that there are any mysteries left unresolved, except maybe a one or two, which I think they just explained it off by saying, well, the thing that we were going to use as the cover-up storyline was actually the truth. So it all actually resolves fairly well, and I would recommend it. If you have an Amazon Prime subscription, you can go check it out there. I don't know how much you'd have to pay to get the DVD set of like everything that's out there, but you would have to get seasons 25 and 26 to capture this particular storyline. I think if you want to buy on Amazon the entire Dark Shadow set, it's like $300 for like the whole DVDs. Knock yourself out if you're so inclined, but I really couldn't, convince myself to get that into it, that I wanted to sink my life into and waste away on the show. But I did like the last couple of seasons, that last 1840 storyline about the family curse and the lottery. That actually turned out to be pretty good, and it also gives you a sense of the soap opera feel. What was it that people watched in those days? Because it's what we watch today on TV, if we even watch TV now that we've got streaming services and video and all that, is nothing like what we saw even, in the 1980s and the 80s shows and 90s shows. Like, I was recently watching Automan. I was recently watching, what was another one? I can't remember. But there's TV that they just don't make anymore, and they never will again. So if you want to experience something like this, which was even unique for the genre that it filled, soap operas and horror usually did not mix. This was one of the few kind of successful soap opera horror mixes that there actually was. And if you want to experience what is kind of a one of a kind series and event, you may as well try it out. It's Dark Shadows, seasons 25, starting with episode 14, and 26. It's the story of the Collins family curse and the lottery, and see if you enjoy it. It'd be fun to know what you think on that. I'm Mike Partika. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you later.